join me on this 270k paragliding adventure from high mountains to the flatlands and into a mystical sunset at the end. But let's jump straight into it. I have launched from Niesen and I'm already in the Lenk, flying more towards the west. You can see the clouds are marking the thermals quite well. There's quite a bit of moisture around, so you can see the clouds are not always perfect, and I sometimes lose a bit of time trying to find the good thermal, because often it's quite cycly and it's also not so clear where the best climb is when the clouds are actually this big, and sometimes they also produce some shade. This is especially due to the northwest wind which prevails in the higher levels. So this pushes the clouds to the south side, as you can see, and this shades also in the terrain and kills sometimes the thermals. So overall I cannot fly as fast as I want to, but still it advances quite well. So I'm approaching here already towards the valleys, and initial goal was to fly to Chamonix, but when I get to the end of the ridge here, due to the northwest wind and concerns of coming back, I actually cut it short and set the first turn point at the end. I do take my time to climb here because I fear that from the other side is the west side, there is no thermals coming, so I actually need this east face here because it's still quite early. So that was the first turn point, and now I'm heading towards the second turn point, out all the way to the flats. But first there's quite a bit of mountain flying to be had, and you can see the clouds are again quite nicely, a touch of too much. You can see also some shade. So here I have to kind of choose if I fly back towards the Niesen where I came from, or if I take a bit of a different route. And since I don't like to fly the same stretch twice so often, I decide to try and fly as far as possible towards the flatlands, and maybe even taking a thermal or two thermals in the flats to stretch out the turn point and get actually an FIA triangle which would span the Alps and the flatlands. But that is quite ambitious, of course, because usually on a good day you have the alpine pumping, and you will see how this turns out in a little bit. But first there's still some mountain flying, and we are heading into the Prealps here. And you can see there are some good cumulus clouds ahead, so I don't bother climbing in the weaker stuff and just push towards these clouds, and sure enough there is actually a very good thermal waiting at the end. So now I'm reaching the Schwarze Gurli area towards Fribourg, and I'm looking for a last climb to take before I go into the flatlands, and this takes me up to base, and now it's all flat, and you can see there are some clouds, but I have a really strong headwind, so it's tough, and I push and I get lower and lower, and I actually throw in the towel relatively early because I don't want to land on this good day. But I didn't see much potential to move further into the flats because I really had a strong headwind. So I go back into the foothills and I have to scratch a bit at the beginning, but then I find a ripper of a climb which brings me up, which brings me back into the game, and I can go back into the mountains and continue my flight. As you can see, there is some high cloud coming from the left. So there's quite a bit of cirrus clouds that actually kills the thermal to some degree. And also the northwest wind, which was present from the beginning of the flight, is steadily increasing here. So now in this stretch I'm pulling a bit the handbrake. You can see I'm thermaling much more than before, and I'm trying to keep my altitude because next comes a big jump over the lake, and here I'm hesitating if I should jump right from this point here, but then I decide against this option and actually fly towards the Niesen first, and I use this northwest wind and a bit of thermal activity to make some more altitude before I go over. So I can make the summit of Niersen and then I cross over. And on the other side, there's always a bit of tricky thing to catch the first thermal. So it doesn't look like it, but often there comes a strong local wind down kind of this plane in front. And you can see I'm catching a thermal in a very odd place, almost above the lake. And this is due to a convergence of the descending wind and of the valley wind, I believe. And I actually cannot manage to catch a climb on the other side, but I get flushed in this wind that comes down. And I have to climb up in the convergence one more time before I can make it to the slope. And even there, I can not really push onto it, so I have to scratch some more before I actually can make it onto the Autobahn. And you will see, now I earned my ticket. I really had to fight hard. But now it's really an absolute highway. So we have some good northwest winds, some good thermals, and these faces just work absolutely beautiful in the afternoon. So you have seen I still turn a little bit, but soon enough I realized, hey, this is actually not necessary because I kind of have a tailwind a bit as well. So all these faces work dynamic, and also the thermals coming off from these faces in the afternoon are quite strong. So it's really a very fast-paced flight now. I'm just flying straight all the way towards Pilatus, towards the third turn point. And I'm not even getting slowed down by the more heavy cirrus that is now coming in. So you can see there's quite a bit of shade to the left. But together with this wind, I reach Pilatus after more than 200 Ks. I turn around and I head back. But now it's a bit trickier because the kind of tailwind that I had before is now a headwind. And I have to make sure to stay high because you can see these cliff faces are orientated always a bit differently. And the wind is kind of coming west-northwest. So there are parts of this face which are well orientated in the wind and are actually soarable, but the other part that are more northeast orientated don't work. So in order to not land, I stay really high as possible, and I also try to stay and arrive in the steep terrain because the steep terrain works even if it's not perfectly orientated into the wind. Because just when you have very steep terrain, all the wind has to go up and you don't need so much wind speeds in order to maintain or gain some altitude. You can see this well here, so this face is not really orientated perfectly into the wind, but it works where it is very steep and then actually can maintain or even climb a bit. So overall, this is approaching the end of the flight. You can see there's some huge clouds forming to my right, so there's a lot of shade coming in. I think this is kind of due to the northwest winds falling into the plains of Switzerland and then getting lifted when they come up to the Alps. And this triggers this massive development and makes it a bit hard for me, but on the other hand, I can also do some soaring, and generally it labelizes the whole air mass and produces also some lift. And now I'm back and I can enjoy this beautiful sunset. Look at the golden colors on the lake. It was even more beautiful in real life, and I'm now approaching the Niersen where I have launched in the morning. So I was hesitant what to do here, but actually I find some good lift again from the strong northwest wind on the Niersen, and I can close this triangle all the way. So this was super cool to do. And now I'm just landing close to Spiez in order to have a quick ride home next to the train station. And since I have some extra altitude, I can enjoy some sunset wingovers after 270k flying through the Alps, some flatlands and some pre-Alps. So it has been a super awesome flight. I have this big grin on my face and I just wing over down before I touch down after this super awesome flight. One last moment of concentration, but the conditions are pretty smooth. So I touch down all happy, a bit tired, a bit exhausted. I hope you enjoyed this flight, and let me know what you think about the markings of the places during the flight, and hopefully see you in the next video.